Do not start wholesaling real estate until you have watched this video in its entirety. What's up, family? My name's Joshua Jones. I am the owner of Gateway Wholesale Academy. And what I'm attempting to do today is really break down the process of real estate wholesaling so that you can make 10, 20, even $30,000 here within the next 30 to 60 days. All right. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would a YouTuber hop on here and give me free game so that I can make money? What's the catch, right? How are you going to make your money? Well, I'm going to be 100% transparent with you. At some point throughout you starting your wholesale business, I do want to be in a position where I can make money with everyone involved, everyone who has gained valuable information from my channel or followed my platforms, things of that nature. But we could talk about that another day. As of right now, in order for me to be able to join forces with you and knock down properties later on in life, I have to get you in a position right now where you're making your own money. All right. So everything that I want to give you today is going to absolutely structure your business in the proper manner. And I want to eliminate a lot of misconceptions. All right. One of the biggest misconceptions is that you need money. There are a ton of people online telling you that you need to buy this software, $99 here, $99 there, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Before you know it, you're paying $2,500 a month. And trust me when I tell you this, I have absolutely done it. My wife gets on me all the time because of the amount of money that I spent when we first met trying to identify courses and get curriculum and certain things that I felt like would make me profitable in this business. But I quickly found out that it doesn't require all of that. All right. You can absolutely do this business with no money out of pocket. And you don't need any complicated software to speed up the process. I'll banish that misconception right now. Let's talk a little bit about it. You know, when you think about platforms like PropStream, PropWire, Batch Leads, these particular softwares, they're reasonably priced at paying like $99 a month and things of that nature. But the way that they're being sold is what I feel like is where I feel like the misconception is, because a lot of individuals are telling you that that is the quickest way for you to be able to get to your first deal and things of that nature. The reason that I have found that not to be true is because you have to keep in mind that if you're seeing that PropStream is a platform that gives you access to properties, pay attention to how many views are on that video, right? If there's 100,000 views on that video, I can tell you that that 100,000 other wholesalers have already seen that video and they already have had access to PropWire. Again, if they're telling you what specific markets are the best markets, keep in mind that those 100,000 other wholesalers are marketing in those specific areas. Now, I don't want to paint a picture that there's something wrong with competition. I do think there's a huge misconception around competition. I think competition is a great way for you to understand where the money is. People are going to do business where the money flows, right? So there's nothing wrong with competition. But what I'm saying is when it comes to these lists, I don't look at them as truly off-market opportunities. Now, I know the true definition of an off-market property is a property that's not for sale on the MLS and no one else has access to the information or the fact that the seller wants to sell. However, think of it this way. If there are 10,000 other people calling one person, the same person that you may pull and be on your list, then I want you to understand that there's nothing to really differentiate you from the other 10,000 people that have called, unless you have a, great personality or you just know how to talk to individuals. I don't know. Those may be things that differentiate you. But the reality is they've already received a ton of phone calls from other individuals who are interested in buying that property. They haven't sold it to them. What's going to make them sell it to you? Right? You may catch them at the right time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that these lists don't work. But what I am saying is that you're putting yourself in a cycle that's going to take you a lot longer filtering through these leads, although it was quicker for you to acquire these leads, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that those systems or softwares or platforms are going to be the thing that shortens the curve to you getting to your first $10,000 or $20,000. All right. So I just want to point that out first, right? It does not take a ton of money in order for you to make it in this business. In fact, you can really do this without any money at all. There are lists that you can pull from the government list, like things like probate leads. You can also pull, what's the other one I'm thinking? My mind's going blank here. You can pull tax lien lists. You can pull code violation list. All of these lists are free. In most cases, sometimes you have to pay for printing. A lot of times I'm starting to see a lot of counties do have these properties where you can access it from the internet. So it's just as simple as you writing down the information and the details. And then you have a list that's not being worked by a ton of people, because it is a little bit harder to get this list in certain cases, especially if you're needing to go down to the courthouse or send an email and wait on a response, right? But understand this, if it's a little harder to get, most people want things easy. All right. So if you do the hard work now, you're going to get the easier deals down the line. All right. So just keep that in mind. So there are some free lists. That is one thing. Let's eliminate that misconception that it takes money and it takes software and it takes all of these things to get involved in real estate. Another way to eliminate the misconception that it takes money is you do not need to buy any of these properties in order for you to be able to make money in real estate. So that means you can actually sell a property having spent $0 on attaining that property or even earnest money. I know a lot of people are going to have questions about that. How are you not putting any earnest money down? And we'll talk about that. All right. But I just want to highlight the fact that you do not need a dime in order for you to make money in real estate. Another misconception is that you need a license, right? You need to be a licensed agent. There are a few states that are changing some rules and they're wanting deals to be done through an agent or for you to have your license. But out of the 50 states in the United States, I think there's only like one or two. And if you absolutely need that information, I can find that information for you. I have not run into that issue. So it hasn't affected my cash flow at all. All right. So you absolutely do not need any license. You don't need to be a realtor. You don't need to be a broker. You don't need to have realtor friends just to close a wholesale deal. Now, I'm not saying it's not a great idea to have realtor friends, but you don't necessarily need them in order for you to be able to close a deal. The third misconception is credit, right? Obviously, people think that finance a property or something of that nature, and it kind of goes hand in hand with you not needing any money out of pocket. You do not need to have good credit at all. I mean, when I started this process, my credit score was in the 400s, and it's still currently being worked on. But I'm telling you this, you do not need great credit in order for you to be able to wholesale real estate. Just not one of those things that you need. All right. So you don't need a ton of money in order for you to be able to make money in this business. I know when I first started out, I immediately jumped to batch leads, the prop streams, all of those things. And I did not close one deal from those sources. And I'm not blaming those sources for me not closing a deal. I'm just simply saying that the way I found actually worked a lot better for me. All right. So I know the question is rolling around in your head about what is wholesaling real estate? What exactly is this process where I can get paid to sell a property that I don't even own? All right. So here's how it works. And I'm going to put this at a third grade level so that everybody can understand. The first thing that you're wanting to do as a wholesaler in this business is you're wanting to find dilapidated, rundown, abandoned, beat up, misused and abused houses. All right. I always make the common joke, we're selling crack houses here, right? But it's not necessarily a crack house unless it makes sense monetarily. But we are selling rundown houses. So this can easily be something that could be found by driving through your local neighborhood. What we call driving for dollars is a great resource for you finding properties in your local area, or surrounding areas if there's not too far away for you to get to. But once you find these properties, whether it be virtually or whether it be in person, the key is to identify who owns this property. Okay, so there are free ways of doing that. You do not need to pay a skip tracing service, even if it's only 10 cents per skip trace. Think about it from this perspective. If it takes you pulling from a lead list of 2,000 individuals, that 10 cent can add up fairly quickly, right? The goal here is to save that money for gas or for some other method in order for you to be able to close these deals. Here's the thing. So I would say there are a few free sources, but the one that I have found to be the most valuable is truepeoplesearch.com. And it's so user friendly. And what I mean by that is you can like reverse lookup. So if I put in an address, I can look up all of the owners who were a part of that address, from the latest owners down to who owned it probably up to, 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years ago, right? That information is going to be provided to me for free on truepeoplesearch.com. Right? I'm going to get the names, I'm going to get the phone numbers, and I'm going to get their current address. And all I want in this particular case, I don't necessarily need the email address. What I want in this particular case is the phone number. All right. So once I have that phone number, my objective is to contact this seller and to ask them if they want to sell this property. Now, you may ask, what are we selling the property for? How do we know how much to sell the property for? Well, there's a couple of steps in the process that is going to make this extremely easy for you. And I'm going to be offering some step-by-step tutorials on like running comps and calculating ARV. But to put this in layman terms, you want to get that property 30 to 40% under what it could sell for if it was fixed up. All right. Boom. Here comes the next question. How do we know what it could sell for if it was fixed up? Well, this is where comparables come in place. So what are comparables? Comparables are the process of identifying properties that are very similar to the one in question, right? So if we're looking at 123 Main Street, we want to find properties with the same square footage, are similar, or really, really close, right? You can be a little off, but really, really close. The same bedroom, bathroom, the same type of yard. If it has a pool, we want to find others with pool. And we want to compare those properties that have sold at top dollar retail price to the property that we now have in question. Okay. So once we have 2 or 3 of those properties, what I usually do, if I have 3, I will divide it I will add all of those numbers up. So let's say we have 3 properties, one sold for 150, one sold for 200,000, one sold for 135. I'm going to add those together and I'm going to divide them by the number of properties. So I'll divide them by 3. That's going to give me what my ARV should be around, right? It's really an estimate, right? So I'm going to give you the raw here. I know a lot of people tell you that these are exact figures, these are exact numbers. That is definitely not the case. These are all based on like averages, right? They're estimates. We don't know with 100% certainty that the property is going to sell for 150,000, but we see 3 other properties where the average says that it should sell for 150,000. Then we want to go with that number, or if you want to be a little bit conservative like myself, I usually go under that number, right? Most people will tell you that will cut into your money. And that is true in some cases, but I would much rather get a deal sold and make 7,500 versus have a deal sit on market forever and not making any money off of it, right? So once you get those numbers, divide it by the number of properties that you have used, and that should be your after repair value or your ARV. All right. Once we have that number, there is a formula that we use to get our max allowable offer, right? What is a maximum allowable offer? That is the number that I do not want to exceed getting the seller under contract for. So I want the seller to agree to a number below what my max allowable offer is. All right. So I can take you through all of those steps. I do use the 70% rule to determine my MAO. But in this case, I want to make this as simple as possible for you. So getting those properties under contract at a 30 to 40% discount kind of already factors in the max allowable offer, what the potential repair costs could be, things of that nature. And you still stand a better chance of doing the deal. As I said, I'll do a tutorial on those other methods just so you can have a better understanding as to how to accurately calculate those numbers. But let's say we get the property under contract for 30 to 40% of a discount, or we're speaking to the seller, we get them to agree to sell the property for a 30 to 40% discount. We now want them to sign what we call a purchase and sell agreement. All right. What this is a contractual document that gives you equitable interest in this property. You have the ability to buy this property yourself, and you also have the ability to sell this property to a potential buyer. All right. So it kind of gives you the right to do with this property what you and the seller have agreed upon. Okay. So once you have that 30% discount, 30 to 40% discount agreed upon, now we want to send that contract to the seller and we want them to sign that document agreeing to that 30 to 40% discount, as well as agreeing to the fact that we now have the rights to either buy that property or sell that property to another buyer, which would be what we call an assignment of contract. All right. Now, the thing is, I get a lot of questions around cash buyers, how to find cash buyers. How do you know somebody's a real cash buyer and not another wholesaler? So there's a couple of things that I want to point out here for you that will help you better be able to differentiate between who's real and who's fake. All right. Here's one thing that works very, 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 very well. When it comes to finding cash buyers, believe it or not, I utilize Facebook, right? You can utilize Craigslist. You can actually ride through the neighborhood where you found the property. And if you find other properties that have been fixed or maybe are being worked on, preferably worked on, You can you can go in, talk to the workers, ask who's the owner of the property. A lot of times you can get their information that way. Another great tool to find cash buyers is Zillow. But I want to talk about both Facebook and Zillow here for a quick second. Now, when it comes to Zillow, what I typically do is go into Zillow, go into the market or city that I have now found the property in, and I will begin to go through the criteria. I will match the data to meet the property requirements. Like if I have a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, I'm going to filter out everything but the 3 bedroom, 2 baths. I'm going to put in the square footage. I'm going to get it as close to that as possible. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and look at the sold properties in the last, let's say, 6 months. Okay. So as I'm looking at those sold properties in the last 6 months, I'm trying to see which properties really jump off the page at me as a flip. And a lot of times you'll find that in the description of the property, like where they're telling you this beautiful property is a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, the grass is green, the trees are nice, all of those things. Usually somewhere in that description, they will tell you that the property has been renovated or fixed up or remodeled. That is a clear indicator that somebody bought that property and turned it around, flipped it, etc. Another way to identify this is to go into the sale history, which is right under that description on Zillow, and look at when the property was initially bought and when it was sold again, right? And you'll see sold twice, like within a year or within 6 months or 3 months. That lets you know that you're dealing with somebody who's flipping properties. Another great resource is to look at properties that are for rent. I know you probably didn't think about that, and I know a lot of people don't talk about that. But if somebody's renting a property, the likelihood that they bought that property is increased, right? You may see a company's number there, you may see an individual's number there, but either way, it's worth you jotting down that information, making the phone call, even if it's a realtor. Jot down the information. Make the phone call, ask about that particular property. Tell them something nice. Don't just go in and be like, hey, I'm looking for the buyer of 123 Main Street. What you want to do, especially if it's a realtor, just say, hey, I was driving through the neighborhood and I noticed the property 123 Main Street was now rehabbed. It looks way better than it looked before. And I was just trying to get an idea of if that person would be interested in flipping any more properties in the area, given the fact that I have a property for sale, right? And trust me, they will give you their information. If you're speaking with a company that buys properties, they're going to, their ears are going to perk up. They're going to want to know more about that property, what the deal looks like, what's the structure, what's the numbers, things of that nature. But they're definitely going to want the information. If you're dealing with a realtor, it may be a little bit of a different conversation simply because realtors want to make money too. And in that particular case, I mean, if they're willing to bring a buyer to the table, I'm more than willing to let them bring a buyer to the table because they would get paid their 3%, from that deal. That's not something, you know, I'm opposed to. But if there's any way at all that I could just get that buyer's information directly, I usually try to make that attempt by developing a relationship with that realtor and things of that nature. And there's ways to go about doing that. You can, because there are going to be properties you run across that just aren't great wholesale deals. They may be better off listing that property. Why not simply refer, some of those properties to those agents and kind of scratch their back in hopes that they would in turn scratch yours. But tons of different strategies that we could dive into and get stuck in a few rabbit holes. But I just want to make this as simple and plain as possible. Just simply try to get the seller's information. Again, you can ride through neighborhoods and find flip properties. Another great resource is Facebook. Facebook is very, very, very simple when it comes to finding cash buyers. What I typically do is join Facebook groups of investors in the area that I'm marketing in. And I join 2 to 3 of those groups a day. If it takes me about a week to join 6 to 9 in those groups, because you have to allow time for them to accept you into the group. That's always something that people run into. They tell you, hey, just click here, join the group, and then get the buyer's information. It may take 1 or 2 days in order for them to accept you into the group. So just keep that in mind in the process as well. But once you're in the group, there's 2 methods that I use to get cash buyers. The first method is I put a simple post in the group that says, is anyone interested in purchasing property in blank area at a 30 to 40% discount? Now, I will say, depending on the time of day, you may get immediate responses. But again, depending on the time of day, you may not get responses until the next day. So just keep that in mind. but you are going to get some type of response. Somebody's going to put their email address. Oh yeah, by the way, put comment email address below or DM me. Things of that nature work as well. But anything to start the conversation with these potential buyers. And when you start that conversation, in both cases, talking to a seller or talking to a buyer, which I'll go over in more in depth here in a second, make sure you're just having a casual conversation, right? You're not going to force anyone to buy a property from you. You're not going to convince anyone to sell you their property. Either they want to or they don't. Keep that in mind. I don't care what anyone tells you. They're trying to make wholesaling real estate some type of sales game where you can convince people to do things they don't want to do. I don't think it works that way. At least it hasn't worked that way for me. And I would hate to sell a person's property that didn't really want to sell it and end up with bad reviews and things like that concerning my business. Maybe they feel like they've been bamboozled or tricked. Don't want to go through that process. So I really don't care what anyone says. Don't buy a course that's telling you they're going to teach you how to properly use a script to get somebody to sell you their property. It's bogus. 100% bogus. The other thing I would say is when you make that post, like I said, have casual conversations. But the second method is just simply go into the search bar of the group and type in cash buyers. Now, this is the quickest way, but there's two issues you'll run into. So you'll immediately see where other people have gone in and done the work for you. They've already asked those questions. They've already gotten feedback. There's tons of email addresses there, maybe even some names and phone numbers, but you want to make a list. Get you a Google Doc, like blank Google Doc, title it cash buyers and just start plugging that information into the list. But as you're plugging that information, here's what I want you to do, because I don't want you to get lost in the sauce. You're putting all this information in, and then you're trying to go back to Facebook and find these individuals. Send the message the moment you see that they posted their email address. Hey, DM Johnny, I saw that you responded to Calvin's message about purchasing property. Are you looking to purchase any other property in the area? I have a few under contract. Boom. They're going to either reply back to you or not, but do that to everyone that you see that has given their information voluntarily, and at least start that conversation. So now you can go into your Google spreadsheet as they reply back, and you can yes or no those buyers as people who are still actively buying. That makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So the two things that you'll run into is that some of those individuals are no longer investing. All right. This is the type of an industry where about 85% of people don't really make it long term. So you may run into some individuals who are not currently actively buying property. Doesn't mean they won't come back to you in the future wanting to buy a property, or, doesn't mean they don't need to keep your name in mind. It just means you may run into that particular issue. The second thing that you could run into is individuals that are wholesalers, right? And I want to talk a little bit about this because there is a way to eliminate that from happening. What I typically do when I get somebody who is just gun ho about buying a property is I ask for a proof of funds. Yes, I said it. I know that is like the thing that most wholesalers struggle with because they're running into sellers that are asking for proof of funds. And there's a way around that. But I asked for their proof of funds because I want to see their name on a bank statement or some type of funding that they have access to. Here's the deal. And I used to tell one of my students this all the time. If they don't want to provide you that information or cannot provide you that information, they're probably a wholesaler just like you. And we don't want to get into daisy chaining or JVs at this point, because the goal here is to get you in a position where you're making money on your own deals. There's nothing wrong with JVing, nothing wrong with those other methods that can help you get and close deals quicker, or utilizing someone else's cash buyers list. But in this case, we want to stay away from those things because our goal here is to build a list of cash buyers that we can market to on a continual basis, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So we don't want to deal with wholesalers. We want to deal directly with cash buyers. Now, the question may be, what if a cash buyer is a real cash buyer and they don't want to give you a list? I have never run into that issue. And they will be more than happy to provide you with HUDs or some type of information that will give you access to what it is that they're currently doing, right? You'll know for a fact that they are, buying property if they're a flipper or if they're a renter or things of that nature. So I don't want you to get caught in the weeds there. All right. So once you have found somebody that has raised their hand and said, yes, I am definitely interested in the property in that area, you want to market that property to them for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 more than what you currently have the property under contract for. Now, don't be a sleazeball. You only you got this property under contract at max or minimum, I should say minimum, a 30 to 40% discount. So you don't want to jack the price up 30 to 40%. All right. One of the things I like to teach is to make your money where you can. Okay. I know there's a lot of promises out here that you can make 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000. And it is 100% true. You can, but you have to do it on the right deals. The lower you get the property under contract for, the more money you can make marketing that to a cash buyer. All right. That's how the game goes. But in this case, let's just say we're going to market this property to a cash buyer for $10,000 more than what we got the property under contract for. All right. So once that is done, say your buyer agrees, you're going to have them sign what we call a purchase and not purchase. I'm sorry. You're going to have them sign what we call an assignment of contract. All right. That assignment of contract is you transferring your equitable interest in that property, now giving them the right to buy that property. Okay. So it's almost as though they're taking your place in the deal and purchasing the property for the price agreed upon. Now, your assignment of contract is going to outline everywhere that money is going, right? It's going to outline the fact that the seller is getting this much, you're getting X amount, and this is what's going to close the deal. All right. So here's the thing. I get a lot of questions around, well, if the buyer sees that I'm making $20,000 on a deal, would they not want to do a deal with me? Let me tell you something. When I'm dealing with buyers, one of the key questions that I'm asking a buyer is this. If I make $1 or $1,000,000 on the deal, does that make a difference as to whether or not you're going to purchase the deal? Here's what most buyers are going to respond and tell you. If the numbers make sense, does not matter to me. If you're dealing with somebody that is so caught up in the fact of how much money you're going to make, probably not somebody you want to do business with long term. Now, I'm not saying don't sell them the deal, but just keep in mind that they're going to be more concerned about the amount of money that you're making instead of the fact that the deal actually makes sense for them economically. Okay. So we want to focus on building relationships in this case when it comes to buyers, because this is not going to be the first or last deal that you're going to market to them. So just keep those types of things in mind. But once they sign that document, the next step is to submit those two contracts to a local title company. All right. Most title companies now have worked with investors in some capacity, but I still like to vet buyers, especially if I'm doing deals virtually. And I really just simply ask two questions. Have you ever done a wholesale deal before? The answer is yes. Then I ask them, how many deals have they done in the past year? If they tell me one deal, I know there's not a lot of experience there. It's a little bit sketchy to me. I may not be as quick to turn in that information to them and process a wholesale transaction with them. But if somebody's done more than 5 deals, they know what they're doing. I just don't ever want you in a situation where you run the risk of not getting paid. And that could potentially happen if someone has never done a wholesale deal before. So just make sure you ask those two questions, and it should give you all the information that you need. But again, most title companies have worked with some investors in some capacity, and so they're fully aware of how the wholesale process works. But just stay away from anybody that has not closed a wholesale deal in their company. I just don't ever want you in a situation where you're not getting your check cut, right? As far as the title company is concerned, a lot of people have questions around what do you do next, things of that nature. My advice would be throughout the entirety of the process, I want you to make sure that you stay in contact with the seller. All right. Keep them aware of what's going on in the process. Keep them aware of the fact that they should have the title company reaching out to them for a closing date, things of that nature. Just check and kind of make sure they're good. When I first started this business, I kind of just thought everything was good since they had signed the contract. And what I ended up running into was the seller calling me frustrated because she hadn't heard anything, and the deal was a trash deal. I got it locked up under contract way too high. And that's what was taking so long because I couldn't get a buyer to bite on that particular deal. And that is why it's important to make sure you get at least a 30 to 40% discount on that property. But she kept reaching out to me, and then it got to the point where she would reach out to me every 2 or 3 days because she was kind of upset about the fact that nothing had currently happened at the moment. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about deals and things of that nature, to stay in contact with your seller throughout the process. But as far as the title company is concerned, they are going to reach out to both the seller and the buyer. They're going to get information. They're going to run title to make sure it's clean title, make sure there's no liens on it, no that they don't owe anything as far as mortgages, taxes, things of that nature. And they're going to make sure that when the deal is done, that the title can be transferred cleanly from the seller to the buyer without any hiccups. And that's when they're going to establish the closing date. Now, um, you don't have to be there for the closing date. It is a great idea to be there for the closing date, simply because that's a great opportunity for you to get testimonials from the seller and the buyer. It's going to help build your brand, your business, and help other individuals want to work with you in the future. Because my hope here is that you are looking to start a business and not just simply, sell a property here and there, right? And if that's the case, so be it. The information here still work for you, but definitely want to make sure you do that. Once that closing date is established, of course, on closing, they're going to exchange funds. Funds are going to be pulled from the buyer's account. They're going to give the seller what is owed to the seller. They're going to give you what we call an assignment fee. In my case, a lot of times when I'm doing it inner city, like where I live, I'm able to collect that check the same day or have that wire transfer the same day. But if you're doing something virtually, of course, they're going to call you throughout the process and get your information for the wire transfer. But once the deal is closed, you probably would receive that wire transfer in anywhere from 3 to 5 business days. But you're definitely going to get paid. All right, you're going to get paid. A couple of things that I kind of wanted to highlight as well, because I know they aren't talked about as much, and it's made to be something where you can download a script, download my free script to, you know, that helped me close over $300,000 in real estate transactions. Here's what I'm going to tell you. That is garbage. All right. Is a script great? Yes. But a script should always be used as a syntax. All right. Meaning like a guide. Think about it this way. If you were trying to sell something, or maybe somebody called you to see if you wanted to sell something, would you want to hear the same thing from everyone every time? No, there's nothing that's going to differentiate you if you're using a script that 1,000 other people are using and reading verbatim. The goal here is to understand what are the things that you need from this individual to determine whether or not this is a great deal. All right. One of the things, here are the 4 top things that you need. You need to understand their motivation behind selling a property. Why do they want to sell the property? What is the reasoning behind it? All right. That is going to let you know whether or not this would potentially pose an opportunity for you to get it discounted, or whether or not they're going to want retail for the property. And this is us speaking as though the seller absolutely wants to sell. Let's say, for example, they've gone through a divorce, they're empty nesters now. Some other different motivations. Maybe somebody passed away. Maybe they're behind on a mortgage. Maybe they're an out of state owner, right? Absentee owner. They own a property that they've been renting out, but they have terrible tenants. So they're a tired landlord. I guess that would fall in that category as well. You want to find out that motivation, because that's going to let you know a couple of things: that they're actively ready to sell this property is the biggest thing it's going to let you become aware of. The second thing besides motivation that you want to identify is the time frame. All right. How soon are they looking to sell the property? Because that is going to determine what the offer needs to be. If they're wanting a higher amount for the property, the chances of them selling it within a week to 2 weeks is going to diminish depending on how high the property is priced. So we want to make sure that we're pricing the property to sell in the amount of time that they're wanting to get the property sold. Right. The third thing that you're going to want to know is the condition of the property. All right. What is the condition? There's a few key things you really want to make sure you're aware of, like updates. When has the property last been updated? right? Has it been 5 years? Has it been 10 years? Did you just recently update the kitchens and the bathrooms? Did you bring them up to date? When's the last time the roof has been updated? Are there cracks in the foundation? Is the AC unit working? When's the last time it's been worked on or replaced? These are all things that you want to be able to identify so that you can better understand what the valuation of this property will be when you're attempting to make an offer. All right. And the final thing you want to understand is price. Um, Price, a lot of times sellers are going to want a bit more. When you're dealing with high levels of motivation, a lot of times what you'll run into is that the seller really just wants to get rid of the property. But when the motivation is kind of iffy, you could find that they want a bit more for the property. Regardless of the fact, I always want to know, where did you come up with that number? All right. If I know that a property at its present condition could only sell for 75K, and they're asking, it doesn't matter if they're asking $50,000. I want to ask where they came up with that number, because they may tell you that a realtor told them they could sell it for that much, or a friend sold their property down the street for that much. These are all things that may not necessarily, um, I would say, may not necessarily factor into the selling of their property. The realtor may have been right in the fact that they could sell it for that much, but given the fact that they want to sell it within the next 2 weeks, that may not be the best price to market that property at. You understand what I'm saying? So I want you to make sure that you're getting those four things: motivation, time frame, condition, and price. As long as you're getting those four things, it does not matter how you conduct the conversation. Now, of course, you don't want to be rude, but you definitely don't want to find yourself reading off of a script verbatim, word for word, sounding like a robot, and everyone else that has probably called them in the last month. You don't want to be that person. So think of it as you calling your auntie or your cousin or your uncle or your homeboy or your partner and saying, "Hey, bro, you want to sell your property?" Think of it as that way. Be cool, be casual, be confident, right? And it doesn't matter if you're fumbling over your words. I know a lot of times people think about, I actually got one guy that reached out to me and said he freezes up when he gets on the call. That's great. A moment of silence, right? Think of it that way. I'm giving them a moment of silence to say hello. Once they say hello, "Hey, how you doing? My name is Josh. I was in the neighborhood the other day and I ran across 123 Main Street. And I was just curious to see if you actually wanted to sell that property. We, just recently sold a few properties, so we have some funds available that we want to reallocate in another direction. Is that something that even interests you?" And they may tell you no. And you could just simply tell them, "Well, I figured it probably wouldn't make sense for you. But would you happen to know of anyone that wants to sell?" That's a key question right there, ninja hack. Um, you want to ask them those questions because they may know of other properties that someone else wants to sell. Maybe someone else in their family has a property that they want to sell. But you just want to, my point here is just have a casual conversation with them. Don't make it anything complicated or complex, all right? Just keep it simple, and I promise it will work out 100% for you. Same is true when it comes to buyers, and having those conversations with them. Do not make this a complicated process at all. Um, Keep it as simple as possible. All right. Keep it as simple as possible. I know we kind of talked about what wholesaling is, and you may be wondering, how is it that I'm even going to go out and find these properties? What marketing tools can I use where it doesn't break the bank for me and I can still get the results that you're talking about, Josh? Well, the biggest one, and I would advise everyone to do this if you have not closed a deal before, don't jump directly into virtual markets, although it is absolutely possible for you to close a wholesale deal going into a virtual market. What I would advise you do is work on your local area, right? Hop in your car, get on your bike, get some rollerblades, get a skateboard, walk, for all means, like run, jog, whatever. But go through the neighborhood and find those rundown houses. And we've all seen them, right? We've all seen those rundown houses, and simply write down those addresses. Here's my advice: I would build up a list as big as I could get it. And I mean like 1,000 names. I know that sounds daunting, but break that up, right? Let's say if we were breaking this up over the course of a 30-day period, I would probably spend the first week just writing down addresses. That's it. Just writing down addresses, going home, using True People Search, putting the phone number and information beside that in the spreadsheet so that I could have that entire list built at the end of the month. And let's say the second week, what I would focus on is contacting those individuals, right? So driving for dollars is one of the best resources because you're finding truly off-market properties that may, you may quickly identify. Most people don't know about, right? Like truly off market opportunities. And in terms of what you want to look for, you want to look for dilapidated houses. Maybe the roof doesn't look quite right, looks a little old, and it's been like that for a while. Maybe they have a tarp on the roof. Maybe the mailbox is overflowing with mail. Brush and grass have grown up everywhere. You may even run into issues where you can see grass growing through the cracks of the driveway. Windows may be busted out or boarded up. You can see the trim around the house is falling off. I mean, there's just so many things to look for when you're thinking about distress. You can clearly see straight through the front of the house to the back of the house because it's empty. It may be something in the neighborhood where you notice that all the other houses around it look like immaculate, but this house just has a funny feel to it, like somebody's not really taking care of the property. And what you'll find is that in a lot of those situations, some people just don't have the money, or they're in a situation where they're behind on payments, or they're constantly at work, or they can't afford to upkeep the house. And in those particular cases, it's a great idea for you to reach out to those potential sellers and see if they're interested in selling a property. Another source that you could utilize to find properties with high levels of motivation are going to be government lists, right? Code violation list, tax lien list, probate list, all of which you can acquire from your local county courts or local county officiating, offices. And you can just simply send an email. I know for a lot of you, you may not want to go down to the courthouse, or, you may not even have a car to get there. But something as simple as sending an email could provide you a list of 100 to, 2, 3, 4, 500 names that you could begin skip tracing through truepeoplesearch.com and making those phone calls to get those sellers' information. So I don't want you to make an excuse that you don't have access to some complicated software or something that you really don't even need to use to close your first wholesale deal, because there's tons of deals right around your local area, right near you, that you could utilize and make a crap ton of money from. So um, I really just kind of wanted to point out what the process is, how the process works, how simple it actually is when you're doing it. But I don't want to make this seem like it doesn't require work, right? Many of you are going to watch this video and you're going to choose not to do a thing because of the amount of work that you're going to discover goes into it when you're trying to do it. The work is not hard. This is super, super, super easy. But you have to be consistent, and it's a numbers game, right? So the more people you call, the more houses you find, the more cash buyers you add to your list, the more deals you're going to do. And it doesn't require you working 4 to 5 hours a day. You can do this in an hour a day. All right. I believe I was working from, it was like 9 to like 3, 4 maybe. I would spend 5, I would eat, of course, and I would spend like 5 to like 6, 6:30, like, skip tracing or driving for dollars. Or I had my days. So like Monday and Tuesday, I would drive for dollars. Wednesday and Thursday, I would skip trace those leads and I would make phone calls. And Friday and Saturday, I would work on my cash buyers list. But if we're breaking this down in months, remember the first week of the month, if we're breaking this down into a 30-day period, the first 7 days, I would spend finding properties. The next 7 days, I would spend skip tracing those properties. The third week, I would probably start working on my buyers list. Because within that second week, you probably should have a few leads who are interested in selling and working through the process of getting some contracts in place. So you could say the third week could kind of be a split between you getting the properties under contract and you beginning to find those cash buyers. And then the fourth week would just be simply marketing the property that you now have under contract to the buyer pool that you've created. Because of course it is going to be a lot easier to build the buyer list than it is the sellers. So market that property to them. And that is what I would suggest to do when it comes to you closing a wholesale deal within the next 30 days. Woo! A lot of information, short amount of time, but I hope you gained value from this video. What I want you to do though, for every one of you who has questions, I simply want you to start posting your questions in the comment section. Follow my channels because I'm always trying to drop gems based on questions that have been asked or information that I feel like you need. And I'm always going to try to do this or provide this information from the perspective of it being free. All right. So I really don't want you in a situation where you're, just spewing out tons of money and you're unable to close a wholesale deal. I want you making 100K in the year 2024, right? Because hopefully we can work on some bigger projects together, and talk about ways for you to expand, the wholesale process, or maybe even just your investment business in general, in the future. So I'm not hiding that from you. But in order for me to be able to do that, I have to get you making money now. So any questions that you may have, man, drop them in the comment section. If you're following me on TikTok, if you're not, please do Gateway Wholesale Academy. If you're not following me on Instagram, Gateway_WA, and Facebook is just simply Gateway Wholesale Academy. Follow me on any one of those 3 platforms and just drop a question here on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel. I am going to continue to drop these gems as much as I humanly can so that you can have everything that you need going forward, to close not just your first wholesale deal, but your first 100K in your first year of real estate wholesaling. So that is all I got for you guys today. Again, my name's Joshua. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you. But I will be back and I'll see you soon. Don't forget to like the video, share this with somebody that's interested, and comment below. All right, I'm out.